pressure looks good.
Starling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Flight outside of speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Go.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center here in Florida, where you are looking live at Launch Complex 39A, where a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket is being prepared for liftoff at 10:22 a.m. Eastern Time, 14:22 UTC. My name is Thomas Burkhardt. I'm an editor and reporter for NASASpaceflight.com, and I'm joined by Chris Gebhardt, Assistant Managing Editor for NASA Spaceflight. Chris, how are you?
I am doing just fine, Thomas. How are you? Well, I asked you how you're doing. I mean, we're standing 10 feet apart from one another, but, but how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. Right now, we are waiting to see if this rocket will be able to get off the ground today. We are looking at a little bit of a weather concern. There is some light rain here at the Kennedy Space Center right now and a lot of overcast clouds. So that's something we're keeping an eye on. We are expecting fueling to begin at around 9:47 a.m. Eastern Time, which is in about 5 minutes, in order for SpaceX to make the opening of their short 10-minute window for this Starlink mission. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. But right now, as far as we know, the countdown is proceeding towards fueling. Today's mission is a standard Starlink mission, 60 Starlink satellites on board. We will have a first stage recovery attempt downrange on, of course, I Still Love You, a drone ship stationed out in the Atlantic Ocean. There will also be a fairing recovery attempt. I believe both fairing recovery vessels are downrange to support fairing recovery efforts. And today's mission will be delivering 60 of those Starlink internet satellites to low Earth orbit. This is the 13th Starlink mission, the 12th launch of the operational version 1.0 Starlink satellites. And yeah, another standard Falcon 9 Starlink mission from the Cape. There have been several of these this year. Today's is going from historic Launch Complex 39A. And just over to our right, there's also Pad 40, where another Falcon 9 will be preparing for a launch on Tuesday evening. But we'll talk more Starbase Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. We also have Michael Baylor in the studio in the background, who will be relaying any questions you guys have. So if you have any questions about today's mission or anything going on here at Cape Canaveral or any other current space news, please go ahead and put them in the chat. You can tag us with @NASASpaceflight to help us see those questions, and we'd love to talk to you and answer them, as well as we continue to give you any updates on today's mission. Right now, we are standing by for the beginning of fueling in just a couple minutes. Michael, do you have any questions from chat that we can talk about or anything like that?
Let's take a look. Again, if you have a question, tag @NASASpaceflight in chat. And it looks like I might need a second to get the panel up. So why don't we maybe talk about something else for a second, if you can?
Sure, we can give another brief overview of the mission. So tonight's mission, or tonight's, it's this morning. This morning's mission will lift off from Pad 39A, which is, you can see on your screen, is home to the fixed service structure with the crew access arm. This is the pad that hosts the commercial crew program for SpaceX. It is also the pad that supports all of the Falcon Heavy missions. But every once in a while, it also supports a more regular Falcon 9 satellite mission, such as today's. And after liftoff, Falcon 9 will pitch down range and fly northeast over the Atlantic Ocean, towards the Carolinas. And the first stage will make a drone ship landing attempt down that way on, of course, I Still Love You. The second stage will continue on to low Earth orbit. The fairings will be jettisoned and will make a recovery attempt downrange as well. And the second stage and 60 Starlink satellites will continue on to low Earth orbit. There has been many of these Starlink missions, so I think everybody knows the general drill, but that's the basic overview. Today's booster is notable. This is booster 58.
1058.
1058. I had to check my number real quick. This is the third flight of booster 1058. The first of which was the infamous Demo 2 mission, the first crewed flight from the United States to orbit since the retirement of the space shuttle. This booster did carry Bob and Doug towards orbit. It also supported the NASA's 2 mission for the South Korean military, that satellite launch. So this is its 3rd flight. And if you look very closely, I know you could see it the other day. We are filming through some weather right now. You might be able to just catch a glimpse of the NASA worm logo on the side. It's still there. You can definitely see that the first stage is nice and scorched from reentry. I believe the fairings are brand new for this mission. Oh, they are not. Chris, where do the fairings?
No, one of the fairing halves flew on the first Starlink mission in May of 2019, and then the 5th Starlink mission earlier this year. So there is one half of the fairing is actually flying for the 3rd time, which is the first time a fairing has flown 3 times. So a lot of what we have seen, right, with SpaceX saying we want to recover the payload fairings because each half of a payload fairing is roughly $3 million that you save. And of course, as with everything SpaceX, they'll never be able to do it. They'll never be able to do it. And here's one flying for a 3rd time that they've successfully recovered with the drone ships. Now, the interesting thing to note for this mission, though, is the coming together of 3 totally unrelated missions here on the Space Coast, all in a 36-hour period, really. We have this one today. Of course, right now it is raining here at the press site and at the Kennedy Space Center, which is never good and is a violation of launch commit criteria to an extent. So we will have to wait and see what they opt to do. But actually, we just got word that they are go for fueling. So this is looking like a setup where they are going to give it every chance they've got and make a decision much closer to liftoff. But we are at T-minus 35 minutes and counting now to the launch of the Falcon 9. Again, we did get word that they are fueling, so we will wait to see. But it is again raining here at the Kennedy Space Center, so I'm not trying to dampen expectations. That pun was unintentional, but once it came out of my mouth, I just had to go with it. Anyway, we don't mean to like lower your expectations or lower your positivity about today. We're just trying to be very honest about what the current weather setup and conditions are here at the Kennedy Space Center, as we have some moisture influx from the Gulf of Mexico as a cold front approaches us here. So, but anyway, with Falcon 9 fueling, this is slated to be the first of 3 missions out of Cape Canaveral here within a 36-hour period. We have the Falcon 9 today at 10:29 with Starling. We have the Delta IV Heavy with the NROL 44 payload set to go at 12:02 a.m. So basically 14 hours from now. So 12:02 a.m. on the morning of Tuesday the 29th, so about 14 hours from now. And then 19 hours after Delta IV goes, we have another Falcon 9 from Pad 40 with the 4th GPS-3 satellite on board. That's a new booster, new configuration of the vehicle. New booster, completely new configuration, all new sections. But Thomas, there was something really, really cool that they talked about but don't unmute just yet. But there was something really cool that Thomas is going to talk about per future GPS missions on Falcon 9. But before we did that, I did just want to say, if we can't launch Starlink today, Starlink does not have priority tomorrow. So Starlink cannot bump Delta IV with NROL, and it cannot bump GPS 3 for the Air Force on the other Falcon 9. So this is the mission of all of them, that if we can't launch today, they'll probably just push it to late September, early October. I know we're already in late September, so it's kind of highly dependent on if those missions go on the 29th or not. But the big question mark is the Delta IV. If the Delta IV can knock it off the pad tonight, again, there becomes a much more wide open question about where does it go. Both it and GPS are both considered national security assets and satellites. It is worth noting that the Delta IV is over a month delayed at this point from its first attempt. It was supposed to launch in June, and that got pushed to July, and then that got pushed to August, and then that got pushed to late August, and then they had big issues on the launch pad for their campaigns then, and we're now a month later from their first attempt, whereas the GPS mission actually got pulled forward by 1 day from the 30th of September to the 29th. So, yes. So there's that. But Thomas, talk about the GPS mission a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about Starlink and the orbit it's going into and the deployment sequence and everything for today. And let me unlock my phone and mute my audio so all of you don't have an echo.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, we are talking about there are several missions on getting prepared for launch here at Cape Canaveral, and it is interesting because over to our right at Space Launch Complex 40, SpaceX's other pad at Cape Canaveral, there is a Falcon 9 that's going to be prepared for launch in just about 24 hours. Well, I guess it's actually about 36 hours, but tomorrow night, and that mission will be on a brand new Falcon 9 booster. However, so the reason that is because the United States Space Force, which is the operator of the GPS constellation, has been basically the last major SpaceX customer that was requiring brand new boosters on all of its missions. I use the past tense there because just recently, the Space Force has modified their launch contracts with SpaceX to allow SpaceX to use reused boosters. Which means that the next two, I believe there's only two more GPS satellites that are ordered to launch on SpaceX as of right now. I believe, yeah, I think there are more coming, but I think two have been awarded past the one launching tomorrow to SpaceX, and both. Right, exactly. So that those two missions will now be able to fly on reused boosters from SpaceX, which means that the final launch customer who was still holding on to every booster that we use needs to be new, has said we are okay with launching our high valuable missions on reused rockets, and SpaceX has taken them on that because that will lower the launch costs and all of that. So this will be the last U.S. Space Force mission required to use new boosters, hopefully. There are several other U.S. Space Force missions on SpaceX's manifest where the contract has not been modified yet. We talked about a Falcon Heavy mission coming up that we know will need at least a new center core because SpaceX doesn't have any center cores sitting around. They do have side boosters, so in theory they could change that.
Close to your phone, but still maintaining distance. 30 minutes away from the launch of Starlink, weather remains 40% favorable for liftoff.
So that is a
unfavorable, which is I believe a flip.
Yeah, so it used to be going into the day, we had a 60% chance of favorable weather that has now been degraded down to 40%. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. Like we said, they are go for fueling. They're going to proceed into fueling. They will likely do the usually standard procedure is to do another weather check at like T-minus 1 minute just to see if it's good, and then they'll decide whether to launch or not. I know recently we had a very similar situation at SAOCOM 1B where we all said the weather doesn't look good. I think it was winds that we were looking at. And they said, we're going to do a final weather check at T-minus 1 minute. We said, okay, we're all expecting to get to T-minus 1 minute and them call us scrub. And we got to T-minus 1 minute and the launch director called out go for launch and we launched right then and there. So don't leave or anything just because it's a low chance of good weather doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's happened before. So we're going to stay right here and we're going to hope that this thing can go this morning.
Indeed. And, for the weather constraints, we were talking about it raining here. It has stopped raining at the press site where we are. However, just looking around, there are really dark storm clouds all around the area. And the biggest concerns for today, at least going into today, I haven't seen the updated forecast yet, but going into today, the main concerns were the cumulus cloud roll and the thick cloud roll, which are big fancy ways of saying lightning. It's my if you're not up at this time, you need to really get up, lazy person alarm for regular beginning of week shenanigans. But anyway, yes, it's a big fancy way of saying lightning and specifically triggered lightning because the atmospheric conditions and the electrical charge in the atmosphere needed to naturally trigger a lightning strike is greatly reduced when a rocket, which is a giant conductor, ascends into the sky. So if you've already got conditions that are perfect for rocket triggered lightning, which is when the rocket goes up, it lowers the overall amount of electrical potential needed in the atmosphere to trigger a lightning strike and can therefore trigger a lightning strike because of the ionizing gas behind the rocket as it ascends. So we really, really want to make sure that rockets are not hit by lightning, not just because we want to protect the rocket. I mean, it is a multi-million-dollar investment, and these things really are investments now, especially the Falcon 9s, which fly more than once. But lightning strikes can also either outright destroy a rocket, they can cripple the flight destruct system, they can cripple guidance systems. And if you cripple a guidance system and a flight destruct system, and you just have a rocket free flying through the atmosphere, that's very bad. That's very bad. So we don't want to do that. And of course, here in the United States, we do have a history of rockets getting struck by lightning, most notably the Apollo 12 mission to the moon and an Atlas mission in 1986. Apollo 12 continued successfully on to its mission. The Atlas was destroyed. So you can see why we get a little concerned for things like that. But as we continue to march down, and again, my apologies, we are suffering a few technical issues here this morning. So we are hoping to take your questions. Unfortunately, we can't see them our side right now. So please do bear with us. Michael is working very hard to fix that behind the scenes.
It's working. We
it's working. We can take questions. There we go. Okay, cool.
But Chris, can you check Discord, please? We want to juggle a modem.
Okay, we'll do. Yep.
And while Chris does that, I will give a brief insight into what exactly you're looking at. Chris mentioned that we are at the press site. We are at the Launch Complex 39 press site. If you're familiar where the big old countdown clock at the NASA Kennedy Space Center is, that's where we're standing, right next to the vehicle assembly building. And we are about 3 miles from pad 39A. So that's what the perspective you're getting from our camera here. We will also be bringing in the official camera feeds from SpaceX's webcast. To have some additional camera views once this thing lifts off. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be showing you whatever the coolest views that we have, whether it's our cameras or SpaceX's. Yeah, and while we're here, again, we want to take any questions you have. So Chris is working on our modems over here. Michael, do you have some questions I can answer?
Yes, and quickly, Moldy Space Industries, thank you for the super chat. And Flex, thank you as well. Rough Riders asks, which booster do you think will perform the first 7th flight?
That is a very good question, and I wish I had my notes in front of me. I have notes on all the boosters and what missions I think I'll get to next, but I don't have that in front of me. What I can say is that one of the upcoming Starlink missions, which they're basically using to fill the gaps between all of their paying customer missions for NASA, Space Force, all those things. One of those Starlink missions will almost certainly see a 7th flight of a booster relatively soon, maybe in the next couple months, simply based on the booster that came back. I'm forgetting what the booster number is that recently completed its 6th flight, but that one had a successful launch and landing, so that would be the prime candidate. I cannot for the life of me, and Chris is looking at me like he doesn't know either. I don't remember the booster number, so I'm sorry I don't have that in front of me, but there's too many boosters to keep track of these days, but I know there is one that is being prepared for its 7th flight that should be relatively soon. I remember it recently launched another Starlink mission. I'm sure someone in chat knows, but I don't have that number in front of me. Sorry.
Yeah, I think looking at I think B1049 was the one that has flown 6 times, so that would probably be the most likely. And then Dougal asks, of course I Still Love You, the drone ship that was out at the last attempt?
I believe it was, yes. Of course I Still Love You was here for the first attempt. We know they had some... Actually, no, I take that back. So the first attempt for this mission was scrubbed due to a recovery issue that SpaceX... They just tweeted recovery issue. We don't have more detail on that. I believe Just Read the Instructions was downrange for that mission. This was a while ago. And by a while, I mean like a week or something. But yeah, which, in space terms isn't really that long of a time now that we think about it. But I believe the first attempt was actually Just Read the Instructions, and they actually brought that back to port. I don't know if the recovery issue meant that there was actually something wrong with the drone ship, or it could have been something completely different. We don't know.
So likely not, because the drone ships and the recovery fleet stayed out there after that first attempt. And then the next day, when they were not able to go again because of the hurricane and that's when they then came back when they stood down from the next day. So probably not the drone ship, just because they didn't come back immediately. They remained out there for another attempt. And when that attempt was delayed multiple days and they knew they were sliding toward range unavailability, that's when Just Read the Instructions came back, and they did all the swapping around to get them both back out there to the same general location for Starlink and GPS.
Actually, yeah, you do mention that there are actually 2 recovery zones that are pretty much right next to one another. Because, like we mentioned, there is a GPS satellite launch planned for tomorrow evening, and both of those missions have drone ship recoveries. So for this particular mission, of course, I Still Love You is stationed downrange. However, the upcoming GPS satellite will feature a first stage landing on Just Read the Instructions, I believe just slightly northeast or northwest, sorry, of the Starlink landing zone. So there are two drone ships, both stationed relatively close to one another downrange right now. Both drone ships out on mission, but of course, I Still Love You will be stationed for this one.
Okay, a couple more super chats. Kelsey, thank you for the membership. And then Starman Steve says, thanks for your great work, NASA Spaceflight. I watch Mary's work every morning and all the Space Coast live feeds. Awesome, thanks. We really appreciate your support, Starman Steve. And then again, if you have more questions, keep tagging at NASA Spaceflight in chat. We'll keep rolling through them as we're at about T-minus 20 minutes now. So we should start to see that large event from Falcon 9. But Martin Smith asks, how many satellites are due to be launched in total? I'm guessing they mean in the Starlink constellation.
Yeah, that's a great question and a number that's still slightly up in the air because I believe what they've got in Thomas, you can correct me, there's the T-minus 20-minute vent. There's no wind again today, so you're not going to see things blowing around. We're right by the flagpole here, and the flag is not moving. So unfortunately, that vent is coming right at us. So not the best viewing angle. But there is our big T-minus 20-minute event. Back to your question, that's a little nebulous and up in the air right now. So we know that SpaceX is that the permits filed with the FCC allow for, and Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong here, up to 42,000 Starlings. But no one has actually confirmed if that's the number they actually intend to be like the high-end operational limit of it, or if they just got permission to launch more than they think they'll need, and they can adjust, or they can launch other ones to replace aging portions of the constellation without having to need reauthorization to launch more. So, and the total number in the first operational constellation has also changed a lot. So we don't know, but the answer is up to 42,000. So yes.
I believe the number for this initial phase of the constellation, which this launch is contributing to, is 1,500. The number 1,584 is in my head.
And it's in my head too, because I think that might have been the original constellation, but then the altitude, but that's when there were different shells and there are more shells. But 52, 30 something, 40 something is about right for the initial rollout to have like the complete initial global coverage for everyone, which we're about halfway there. This will bring the total number launched to 775 or something like that, or 755 or something like that. So you can see we're about halfway there, which makes sense considering we're about at 45 degrees latitude coming down from the poles, and halfway between 90 and 0 is 45. So you can see they're about there. So yeah, 1,500 probably works for initial global offerings. And by that, we really mean Southern Canada and the United States and Australia, which are the ones where the permits have actually been applied for right now to actually use them.
And we just got a report that it's currently raining in Titusville, so the rain might be headed towards the launch pad. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But I'm bringing up I'm bringing up the radar on my computer right now. I'm going to take a look and see what the situation is.
So basically, we have a weather pattern set up where the winds are drawing a lot of warm, moist air from the Gulf across the already heated air and unstable air over the peninsula, and it's triggering storms and showers that are pushing east to northeast across the peninsula. So that is what we're facing today. So yeah, anything inland is coming at the Space Center today. And all of this is because primarily of an approaching frontal system that will push through on Wednesday and actually bring us unseasonably cold temperatures of the low 60s here in Central Florida for the beginning of October. But it's all thanks to our changing weather pattern. This happens every year in Florida. This is our normal awkward transition phase between summer and what Florida likes to call autumn. But yeah, that's what we've got for our setup here today.
And is it raining where you are right now, Chris?
It is drizzling just a little bit.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm seeing on the radar right now. It looks like the entire Cape area is a light drizzle. So again, the weather was 40% go as of the latest update from SpaceX. We'll have to see what happens, but weather closely being watched at T-minus 16 minutes, which means that second stage liquid oxygen loading is now underway.
Yes, indeed. And this is not uncommon for SpaceX to do when there's still at least a potential of getting off the ground. They will sometimes fuel. We have seen them actually continue fueling after they start when they know they're not actually going to be able to, because it's just thermally easier on the vehicle to fill it completely and then drain it completely. So again, not surprising that we are fueling even if we don't get off the ground today, and not surprising even if they make the call sooner rather than later that we wouldn't see them proceed down to 60 seconds or 30 seconds or something like that and then cut off, because it also at the end of the day provides extra practice for the launch team as well.
Michael, do we have the countdown net piped in so we can be listening for any call-outs that might happen over there?
Not right now, but it's completely quiet.
Okay, thank you.
I'll let you know if I hear anything. Sandy AP says, it's a super chat. Thank you, Sandy. Do you think OneWeb will have the upper hand in being the first at higher latitudes such as Alaska, at least in the short run, thanks to your coverage?
It's a good question. I mean, we know that the high latitude orbits that SpaceX is launching the Starlinks into, right? A 550 kilometer operational orbit can actually see a fair bit of the planet's surface up toward the polar regions, even at 550 kilometers. So I don't know the answer to that. I think a lot still needs to, for the OneWeb side of things, I think a lot still needs to be worked out on exactly how that's going to work and exactly how they're offering services and to who. Because one of the bizarre things about the OneWeb rescue announcement earlier this year, when the UK government bought a huge portion of the interest in that company, was they automatically said in the release of, look at this big new thing we're doing, but we're not letting you use it, and we're not letting you use it, and we're not letting you use it. And it's like, okay, so who does get to use it? And I don't think they've really answered that question since the takeover. It's been very, very quiet. So it's an excellent question, but there just really isn't a firm answer for it just yet. Oh, a breeze! My God. Sorry, that makes like all the like what it feels like temperature difference, just a little tiny breeze. But yeah, that's where we are right now with OneWeb.
And then any info on if people can still see these satellites as they move to their final orbits? I guess because SpaceX, if everyone remembers, has started introducing some different methods of orientating the satellites on while they're orbit raising to reduce their reflections. Do we know if they can still be seen?
They can still be seen, yes. The purpose of that new technology, the Shield, primarily, which is the newest version, is once again primarily for those operational orbits. Once they can orient them properly when they're up at their 550 kilometer operational altitudes. So yeah, they're still very visible. And what is it, Celeste track or something like that sends out the two line elements, the TLEs, which are the predicted orbital parameters, which is how we know this one in particular is going into an initial deployment orbit of 280 by 290 kilometers, with a release of all the satellites about 61 minutes after liftoff. And again, the altitude that they go into, the timing of their release is all predicated on what plane they're trying to go into and how many satellites they're trying to drift into adjacent planes.
And that deployment time, 61 minutes after liftoff, is much later than most of the standard 60 Starlink internet satellite launches. We know they've had some rideshare missions where the payload was slightly different. They took off a couple Starlinks to replace with customer payloads. So those flight profiles were a little different and had some longer kind of coasts until a final burn and then payload deploy. But this one is a standard all just 60 Starlink satellites, and it's doing a different flight profile. What do we have any reason to speculate as to why they might have changed that?
Yeah. So I think it comes down to ultimately, right, your the phasing requirements that you want to do with the particular plane that you're launching into. You know, orbital mechanics. How to describe this? It's not necessarily just about getting into the correct plane, but being at the correct place in the correct plane when you start certain sequences, because of just how you can naturally let some of that energy that you're expending on the release of the satellites do some of the work for you in starting to spread them out in the correct way to phase them out. Because like a good general rule of thumb, it's not entirely correct for every single one of the 12 that have gone so far, or the 13th on the pad today, but basically 60 satellites are launched, more or less, give or take. 20 of them get phased to the left into the plane adjacent to the one you've just launched into. 20 of them stay in the plane you launched into, and the next 20 go to the get phased to the right. And it's really complicated. Kerbal Space Program can do a better job of explaining this, but it's not just your orbital inclination; it's where you are in your orbit when you're doing certain things, right? That can really make a difference on your energy consumption and energy usage. So that's why I would say the different deployment times.
Okay, and I'm looking for more questions.
Yeah, and it's raining harder now here at the press site as well, as the wind has picked up just a little bit here. So again, we're just waiting to see if the weather can clear. It was about 60% chance no-go probability as of about 20-ish minutes ago when SpaceX tweeted.
Yeah, again, if
We
you have
are
questions,
less than 10 minutes away, so we're getting close to the point where SpaceX will have to make a decision. Again, Michael's listening on the count.net. If we get some sort of hold or scrub call out, you'll hear it. If we do get a hold, that does mean a scrub now that we've started fueling. It's not a very long window. Starlink missions do have about a 10-minute window, but basically, if they want to target anything other than the opening of the window, they have to decide that prior to fueling. And since they didn't do that, they started fueling on the timeline to launch at the opening of the window. So basically, it's a one-shot, basically an effectively instantaneous launch window today. If you get a hold for any reason you cannot recycle today, it'll be a scrub and a launch attempt on a different day.
And that is because our overall launch window was 20 minutes today, opening at 10:12 right now, and extending until roughly 10:32, 10:33. And they always try to target in-plane dead center of the window because that's the most propellant and most efficient way to do it when you have a specific target that you're trying to get to. In this case, it's an imaginary target of the plane that you're trying to launch into. But aside from that, the reason it becomes instantaneous now that because they're targeting 10 minutes into a 20-minute window, is because the recycle point, the point that they have to pull back to that we know for the Block 5s, is T minus 13 minutes. So once you recycle to T minus 13, you're done if you've only got 10 minutes in your window.
Yep. And do we know how many Starlink satellites could launch on a Starship?
Way more.
I was going to say many.
Yeah, we don't have an exact number, mostly because Starship is still in development. Obviously, the design is kind of at a mostly completed state, but they're going to be tweaking some things. The exact payload volume or mass figures aren't set in stone yet, so we don't have an exact number, but much more than on a Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy could. So that's something. Yeah.
I mean, we know that they say that Starship can take 100 metric tons to any location in the solar system. So, I mean, if we just use that basic thing to extrapolate, if a full
And
Starling
we're
stack
getting a
is
live.
60.
Sorry, we're getting a live look at. Of course, I still love you right now.
Oh, okay. But if you just take that 16 metric tons for 60 Starling satellites and you start multiplying that out, well, two times would be 32, 4 times would be 64, so 500 ish, give or take, Starlinks. I mean, that are theoretically possible from the lift capabilities we know have been released by SpaceX right now for Starship. And if we are all on track, we are under the 7-minute mark, which means engine chill down has begun. So they have opened some of the fuel some of the fuel valves in all 9 of the Merlin engines to start letting that really cold densified liquid oxygen trickle down into the engine chambers to thermally condition them for launch, so they don't undergo what's known as cryoshock at the moment of ignition. So basically, they open up those drain lines, a little bit of densified liquid oxygen flows in, chills down the engines to an acceptable temperature range for liftoff.
And here is a live shot. In a second, they're going to show a live shot of the second recovery vessels. There you go.
Ah, yes,
As you
both
can
of them
see,
have the nets. Nice.
both have nets up. So we'll have to see what happens. But there are Go Miss Chief and Go Miss Tree.
Because if this all...
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, if you remember on a previous attempt, Miss Tree had an issue and had to go to port. But it appears that Miss Tree is back in action.
Yes, indeed. And if this all goes to plan again, we're waiting to see if weather's going to get them or not. But if it all goes to plan, Go Mystery and Go Mischief will return with each with a complete fairing, but half of a fairing from Starlink and half of a fairing from GPS. But each of them should be, if it all goes to plan, hauling back two full payload fairings, which is $12 million worth of recovered hardware. Yeah.
And an important update, they are no-go for weather at the moment. Again, they are no-go for weather at the moment, but they are going to take this down to the end and hope it improves in the next 5 minutes.
Gotcha. And to set everyone's expectations, it is raining at the press site right now. That no precipitation within X number of kilometers of the pad. There's also a huge, really tall cloud directly over the launch pad, which would be one of the thick cloud violation rules for triggered lightning. We'll see. Never say never, but we'll see. Did they
Crazier
say
things have happened?
Yes, very much. Very much so. But Michael, did they say when they were going to make that determination at T-1 minute or something?
No, but it is usually T-1 minute with SpaceX, so that's probably a good guess.
Okay, that sounds good.
And again, if they do not launch this mission today, it will likely be delayed until past the 2 other Cape Canaveral missions, because both the NROL-44 Delta IV Heavy launch and the GPS-3 SVO4 mission on a Falcon 9 are higher priority national security missions that would take range priority over a Starlink mission. So just to set expectations. But again, if weather cooperates in the next couple of minutes, this one can go before both of those. So we will see.
And the remote camera is ready to go just in case. And by remote, I mean the one that I have right here with me that's just going to be doing its own little thing that I tell it to do with the MyOps.
So T-3 minutes. Thomas and Chris, remember as we get closer to launch, I will have you switch to internal audio.
100%.
We'll wait till like at least just after T-1 minute maybe. So if they scrub before then, we can talk about it. You can see the water tower dumping some water, which is normal.
I love that that's how they know it's full. Like all this technology, and how do we know the water tower's full? We'll just overflow it.
All eyes at the press site are turned towards Pad 39A. We got a huge press corps in hopes that this mission will get off the ground. We'll see in a couple minutes here.
And I am with the countdown net's been super quiet. I'm not even sure if they're working. If they also have the webcast audio in my ear, so I will report exactly what happens.
Copy that. If you're just joining us, we are at T-minus 2 minutes and counting now. Falcon 9 counting down to the liftoff of the latest Starlink mission. We are monitoring weather. SpaceX is expected to make one final weather evaluation right before liftoff to see if they are go for launch. That we are currently no-go from the most recent report, but we're standing by to see if weather cooperates here in the last couple minutes. T-minus 90 seconds. And if we do get past 1 minute, you'll actually see our countdown timer go away because it is not exactly synced to the countdown timer, and we don't want to be off on that. So if we get really close, you'll actually see that disappear. But stand by. T-minus
Okay.
1 minute.
Okay, still counting, so let's switch to internal audio, Chris and Thomas. Mute on Discord, and I will turn on the camera microphone.
And that's done, and we should be on external volume now as we
Sounds good.
head toward what could be a fascinating dodge of the weather here this morning.
Okay, we have a scrub.
Which is always good. Scrub, there we go. That's not entirely unsuspecting.
Okay, let's move back to Discord,
All
Chris
right.
and Thomas.
And we're back on Discord. Well, we got a glimmer of hope. We got past 1 minute, but it looks like SpaceX has decided to scrub for the day. Weather likely did not cooperate. That means there will not be another launch attempt for this mission today. They do not have time to recycle. The next launch attempt would be theoretically no earlier than Wednesday, assuming that both the GPS and NROL missions cooperate and go right on time, which is not at all a given the weather and all the other things going on. So we'll stand by for SpaceX to get an official new launch target, but they are not launching today. We are scrubbed for the day due to weather. Yeah, so unfortunately, the first of 3 launches from Cape Canaveral in the next 36 hours will not go on its attempt today. The next launch from Cape Canaveral will be a Delta IV Heavy with the NROL 44 mission. That is scheduled for tonight at 12:02 a.m. Eastern Time. That is 04:02 UTC. That is the opening of the window, and that mission will hopefully get some better weather luck than Falcon 9 did this morning and go tonight. Of course, we will have live coverage of that mission here on NASASpaceflight, but this Starlink mission will not be going off on this attempt.
But of course, too. Oh, sorry. Yeah, but of course, too. It's worth noting that Falcon 9 originally moved. This mission originally moved to October 1st, when it looked like the Delta was going to interfere. So October 1st would be my educated guess as to when they'll initially try, but maybe if they can get the range for the 30th, if these 2 missions tomorrow go as anticipated.
And we just had a hiccup. One second. We just lost Discord audio. Okay. Chat, let us know if you can hear us. We just had a weird hiccup on our end, but I think it's fixed now.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us from Kennedy Space Center?
I think we're good. Okay, we're good. 5 by 5. Continue. Sorry.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
Like we said, we are scrubbed for today, but if we have any questions about the scrub or anything, we can take those before we start to wrap things up here.
Okay, let's see. Well, a couple of super chats I'll run through quickly. Peter Ruth, thank you for the membership and for the super chat. He says, "Go SpaceX." Moldy Space Industries with the hashtag Thomas and Chris Florida Fan Club. Moldy Space Industries also with the $2 super chat. See y'all again soon for Delta. Yes, definitely hoping for a good Delta launch tonight, and that would clear the range for the GPS launch and the next Starlink launch attempt. And then finally, Tim Bow, $5. Given the size of Starship, would it have a larger weather launch window? Like it could handle more without being scrubbed? Do you know, Thomas or Chris?
There's been some speculation. We all know that Starship and the Super Heavy booster are designed to launch much more frequently than any current launch system. I mean, Elon Musk has hinted that they want to launch this thing multiple times a day, not just in support of things like Mars missions, but also Earth-to-Earth transportation and all of the applications that Starship has. So in order to accomplish that, there's been some speculation that they might overbuild the structural integrity of the vehicle a little bit so that it can handle, a little more wind shear during launch or things like that. Things that would normally constrain a liftoff from occurring due to weather. There's been talks about SpaceX potentially building that into the design so that its weather criteria are less strict than, say, Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy. But that is pure speculation. I don't think we have any hard data from SpaceX or Elon about exactly what kind of weather criteria Starship would have. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly what you said. We don't have concrete data, and this will be something fascinating that in the next Starship update that I think me, should ask, because what we have heard would lead us to believe that they are designing Starship in many ways to be analogous to airlines, right, and commercial aircraft like the Boeing 737 or or the Airbus vehicles that are all very popular and used around the world, because they have to be able to take off and land in very sometimes serious and severe weather. They have to be able to be struck by lightning and survive the lightning strike, in terms of everything. And Starship is really seeming to be going that way, because one thing that has to be baked into design is if you're really talking about Earth point to point anywhere on the planet within 45 minutes, well, if you're trying to bring a Starship point to point from, let's say, Australia, and you're bringing it to Florida, and it's June, and your landing time in Florida is going to be 4:12 p.m., you can launch from Australia, and by the time you get here 45 minutes later, that crystal clear sky is gone, and there is a terrifying thunderstorm over you. That hey, in the summertime may or may not be tornado warned. Here, Thomas is just silently shaking his head.
Chris is born and bred into the Florida lifestyle. I'm merely adopting it at this point. But yeah, and it's a good point because unlike an airliner, which can just divert around weather if weather appears at its landing site, a rocket on a ballistic trajectory can't just steer out of the way. That's not a thing that ballistics do. So you can't just avoid weather if it appears en route. So yeah, there has to be some better landing conditions. And SpaceX already kind of does this to a small degree. The Falcon 9 boosters do land 7 minutes-ish after liftoff. Obviously, even Florida weather can't change that dramatically in 7 minutes. But again, they do... Well, all right, Chris is saying that again. But they at least have an idea, and they do look at weather at the recovery zone, whether that's here at Cape Canaveral or downrange at a drone ship, to make sure that weather is acceptable before they lift off for launch. So, yeah.
And we have seen, right, that like the Falcon 9 that did encounter the upper air disturbances that Elon was saying, it couldn't make it to the drone ship because the upper level winds blew it too far, of course. But then he followed that with, but that's just a software thing. Like it wasn't even a like, oh no, we hit the upper limit of the vehicle. No, we didn't even hit the upper limit of the vehicle. They just hit the upper limit of what the flight software was designed to handle, and then they got more information, and we haven't seen it be a problem since. So yeah, I think you're right. Like we're seeing those baby steps toward that larger process of getting comfortable with flying these vehicles in various situations.
Yeah, just a note on the scrub. It was called at T-minus 31 seconds. So what happened there was if you have watched the SpaceX countdowns before at T-minus 45 seconds, the launch director confirms that they're go for launch. So in this case, the launch director did not confirm that they would go for launch at T-minus 45 seconds. they were likely waiting for the very final weather report, and then immediately after he got it, he called the hold. So a very last minute hold, or last second hold, literally 31 seconds left in the countdown. But SpaceX gave it everything they had, but weather was just not good enough today.
And 31 seconds is a wonderful marker for rocketry. And again, if you go back in history, you'll understand the 31-second reference there. Although it's different for the Falcon 9, just happens to be coincidental today. But yes, with Falcon 9 scrubbed for the day, oh boy, Thomas and I have to get back to Daytona to do some work and sleep. He has to put gas in the car. I have to charge my car because we got to turn around and be back here for a Delta 4 tonight, don't we, Thomas?
We do, and it's funny, I just realized that. So there are 4 of the most active pads here at Cape Canaveral. All have rockets nearby. We have a Falcon 9 on 39A. There's an Atlas 5 being stacked at pad 41 for the NRO 101 mission coming up in a few weeks, pending whenever Delta gets off the ground. We have a Falcon 9. We're looking at pad 40 right now. There's not a Falcon 9 vertical on the pad. We can't tell if they've rolled that out yet. It might still be in the hangar. That's coming up tomorrow night. But there's a Falcon 9 over there somewhere. And then if we look a little bit to our right, we see trees. But behind the trees is the Delta 4 Heavy pad, where we know a Delta 4 Heavy is currently in its mobile service tower. They will start to roll that back soon in preparation for tonight's launch. But all 4 of those missions have space vehicles getting ready to go. And the next one is Delta 4 Heavy tonight.
And in addition to the ones that are on the pad, there are all 10 booster segments for Artemis 1 that are here at the Kennedy Space Center that we are looking at the rotation processing and surge facility right now. Orion is here in the operations and checkout building along with the interim cryogenic propulsion stage for Artemis 1. What did I say something wrong?
The ICPS as well.
The ICPS. Yes. What did I say?
Well, you just didn't say that.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes. And the ICPS, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, is here as well. There's a lot of hardware here for future missions, and that doesn't even count all the Falcon 9 boosters that are here. And the second stage Dragon is here in 39A, or not in 39A yet, but Dragon is here for Crew 1 next month. It's this is a good place to end it. We went through such a period at the beginning of the previous decade where nothing was happening, and where, oh my God, if the Atlas had 4 missions in a year, that was amazing, and that seemed like a lot if the Atlas had 4 in a year, and that was it. And the fact that we just rattled off everything that's here and the things that are here that are launching within 36 hours from now is remarkable, and it's very nice to see the Space Center back to what we want it to be.
And there's an Antares launch from just up north at Wallops Flight Facility, also on the east coast of the U.S., just not Cape Canaveral. That's coming up now Thursday evening, I believe. They just delayed because of some weather. So really, 4 launches from the east coast of the U.S. coming up. But this one this morning did not go on its attempt. We are going to begin wrapping up here, Michael. So I think Chris and I will sign off. My name is Thomas Burkhart, editor and reporter for NASASpaceflight. I'm joined by Chris Gebhardt. Chris, no launch this morning, but we will hopefully be back this evening, yeah?
Yes, indeed. We will be back this evening. Well, we hope to be back this evening. Right now, United Launch Alliance says that all, from a technical perspective, is progressing on track for a liftoff at 12:02 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:02 UTC tonight. Technically Tuesday morning, but I want to say tonight. Just to make that clear, because the day transition boundaries can get a little muddled there. But yes, we will be back for that. But ULA noting that from a technical perspective, everything's going well. Of course, Florida's very turbulent weather today. We need to see if that will interfere with MST rollback or any of the other pad operations that they have at 37B today in order to make that attempt tonight. So keep following us on Twitter for updates on the ULA mission. Thomas and I will be back with you around 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 a.m. UTC for that launch of the Delta 4 Heavy, if they do indeed attempt to go tonight. But with that, we are going to shut it down and head out of here. I'm Chris Gebhardt, Assistant Managing Editor of NASASpaceflight. Thanks to Thomas. Thank you to Michael, our wonderful producer in the background. And shout out to Doss as well, who was kind of here, but is working on a nice little special project that we'll be able to talk with you about hopefully very soon, but he was here helping us as well. So with that, we're going to say goodbye for now from the Kennedy Space Center, and we will see you in a few hours from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station for another rocket launch.
RCP chamber pressure looks good. Starling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Water towers fly! Flight outside of speed off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.